Hello everybody, today we're discussing chapters 16 through 22 of Deathly Hallows. A whole lot of plot happens in these chapters, but I thought I'd take a big step back as we near the end of the series and talk about a literary influence that I've been tracking as we've been reading this semester. As you know, Rowling's been pulling from all kinds of different myths, legends, and folklore throughout the series, and it's been a lot of fun, nerd fun, so my kind of fun, to spot the different traditions being alluded to in the text. We've talked about a few of these, and Harry Potter and Beyond gets into some others, as did the A Bit of Light Reading article, A Postmodern Wizard, the Religious Bricolage of the Harry Potter series. But we haven't spent much time on the legends of King Arthur. These are among Britain's most famous and foundational mythologies, so it makes sense that we can see a lot of parallels to our magical teenage boy hero. There are a lot of different versions of the Arthurian romances, which, with splits across centuries and countries, they take the stories in various directions and often contradict each other. So the parallels don't all come from the same version, but I thought I'd run through some of them. Not all. There are a lot. Someone's probably writing a whole book about it right now. But I'll just point out one or two things from each book in the series. Okay, so Cohen's article, A Postmodern Wizard, the Religious Bricolage of the Harry Potter series, discussed the parallels between Merlin and Dumbledore, which includes their appearance, magic prowess, and tendency toward manipulation and cunning. But my favorite little detail is that the Merlin in Edmund Spenser's poem, The Fairy Queen, has a magical mirror called the Mirror of King Rience that shows the viewer what they want, which seems like a likely precursor to Dumbledore's Mirror of Erised in Sorcerer's Stone. Next, as Pugh mentioned in the Fantasy Foundations chapter, Arthur was born heir to the throne of England, but there was a lot of conflict going on at the time, so the wizard Merlin had him sent off to be raised in secret, in a place where no one would know his real identity, not even Arthur. This gives us a pretty clear parallel to Harry in Sorcerer's Stone. Arthur grows up not knowing who he is, and when the king dies, Merlin enchants a sword so that it can only be pulled out of a stone by the true heir to the throne. Teenage Arthur pulls out the sword and becomes king. Harry also grows up not knowing who he is. Among his first acts in the magical world is to be chosen by a particular wand, with a twin core to Voldemort's, which confirms his unique role as the chosen one. And then, in Chamber of Secrets, we get a parallel sword scene when Harry pulls Gryffindor's sword from the Sorting Hat, proving that he's a true Gryffindor. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry learns to produce a Patronus, which turns out to be the same as his dad's, a stag. There are lots of white stags in mythology. In Celtic legend, white stags appear when a person is transgressing a taboo, and when the other world, the world of the gods and the dead, is near. Harry breaking the Time Turner taboo on seeing himself would seem to qualify, and his impression that his dad is there with him may represent the other world. Dumbledore says to him afterward, "Your father is alive in you, Harry, and shows himself most plainly when you need of him. How else could you produce that particular Patronus?" In Christian legends, the white stag, or hart, symbolizes Christ, probably inspired by the story of the Roman soldier St. Eustace, who is out hunting and comes upon a deer with a cross between his antlers, and St. Eustace immediately converts to Christianity. There's another instance of the Harry as Jesus iconography of the series. In Arthurian legends, the white stag often turns up in the forests around Arthur's castle and is a call to adventure, prompting the knights to go off on quests. When they struggle with their quests, the white stag often reappears as a guide to help them. We might read the white doe in the chapters for today as another iteration of the white stag, appearing to Harry in the forest and leading him to the tool that he needs for his quest. It may also be significant that when Harry looks down into the pond before he can tell it's a sword, he sees a great silver cross. Speaking of quests, Arthur and his knights of the Round Table go on quests to battle foreign enemies, slay strange beasts, rescue fair maidens, and search for the Holy Grail. Many of the Harry Potter books are quest-based, but this particular set of chivalric tasks, Beast, Maidens, Grail, is most closely mimicked in Goblet of Fire, when Harry battles foreign competitors to defeat a dragon, rescue a fair maiden, and also Ron, and search for the Triwizard Cup. The Triwizard Cup, of course, turns out to be a portkey, and touching it takes Cedric to his death. But, in another way, what Harry finds in the graveyard has similarities to Holy Grail lore. Before becoming imbued with religious significance as the cup that caught the blood of Christ on the cross, the Holy Grail appeared in legends that were more secular and inspired by mythologies from Greek, Roman, and Celtic traditions. In these stories, the Grail-like object was sometimes a magical cauldron that could restore life, not unlike the magical cauldron in which Wormtail restores Voldemort to his embodied form. Next, in Order of the Phoenix, Harry learns about the prophecy told to Dumbledore, and Voldemort's attempt to avoid being killed by Harry by killing Harry first, even though the prophecy didn't actually say which baby it's talking about, just that the baby will be born at the end of July. And of course, this completely backfires. And this has a parallel in Arthurian legend, though Harry and Arthur aren't the ones being paralleled directly. Instead, Merlin cryptically prophesizes that a baby born on May Day will grow up to defeat Arthur. So Arthur tries to kill his baby first, but he's not sure which baby it is, so he puts all the babies born on May Day on a ship out to sea. But when there's a shipwreck, the baby Mordred survives and is found and raised by an ordinary family until his teen years. He grows up to join the knights, and in most versions does ultimately kill Arthur in various really gory scenes that I'm not going to describe, but in which Mordred also dies. Of course, this is a popular plotline, with some elements that are similar to Moses, Jesus, and Oedipus. People are just always trying to kill the prophecy babies. So Arthurian legend may be just one strand of this parallel. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore sets Harry off on another quest, known in modern role-playing games as a fetch quest, because Harry needs to collect a bunch of things, specifically Horcruxes, to complete the quest. Just for good measure, Deathly Hallows introduces a second fetch quest with the Deathly Hallows, which Xenophilius Lovegood speaks about with diction that mimics that of Arthurian legends, such as believers seek the Deathly Hallows. He calls himself a quester with a capital Q. One thing that's interesting to note here is that when the title of the final Harry Potter book was announced prior to its publication, the general response was along the lines of, what the hell is a hallow? The word can mean saint, but it also refers to a sacred or magical object or artifact. And one of the primary uses prior to Harry Potter was in reference to 4 objects that King Arthur's knights sought associated with the Holy Grail. The Grail itself, which is a cup, a bowl or dish from the Last Supper, a sword, either the Sword of David or the one that beheaded John the Baptist, and the Spear of Destiny, used to stab Jesus on the cross. These together are known as the Grail Hallows, and they also correspond to the tarot card suits. Swords, cups, discs, that's the bowl, and wands, that's the spear. Interestingly, these have some correspondence to the Horcruxes we know about. Hufflepuff's cup as the Grail, Slytherin's locket as the disc, and Gryffindor's sword, which Voldemort did not succeed in turning into a Horcrux, but wanted to, and which can instead destroy the Horcruxes. That leaves the Spear of Destiny, represented as a wand in the tarot suits. Enter the Deathly Hallows, specifically the Wand of Destiny, given to the brother Antioch in the Tale of the Three Brothers. They don't have names in the Tale of the Three Brothers, but we're going to find out that his name was Antioch. In real life, during the First Crusade in the 11th century, a group of knights found what they believed to be the Spear of Destiny in a cathedral in Antioch, Turkey. It was the subject of a legend that whoever had the spear could conquer the world. The Resurrection Stone also has a counterpart in Arthurian legend. In most versions, the Holy Grail is a cup, but there was one German version from the 13th century in which the Holy Grail is a precious stone fallen from heaven, possibly modeled on the medieval altar stone, which symbolized the stone rolled from Christ's tomb following the resurrection. Here's an English translation from that legend. By virtue of this stone, the phoenix is burned to ashes, in which he is reborn. Thus does the phoenix molt his feathers, which done, it shines dazzling bright and lovely as before. The last Hallow, the invisibility cloak, is less directly paralleled. Arthurian legend does include a traitorous knight called Garland, who has armor that makes him invisible, but he mainly uses it to run around killing people, which doesn't seem quite right. However, Arthur does have a magical scabbard for his sword, Excalibur, which protects the wearer from death. When the scabbard is stolen and thrown into a lake, Arthur is finally able to be killed. Finally, on the topic of Excalibur, you may have wondered, why must Gryffindor's sword be in the icy lake? Surely it could have been left in the snow next to the icy lake. In World, the explanation is that a person can only get Gryffindor's sword by doing something courageous in a time of need, such as diving into a frozen lake to save a friend. This makes it an excellent vehicle for redemption arcs and glow-up sequences. Though, quick note, J.K. Rowling, maybe it didn't need to be only male characters who pull out and wield the sword. Just a thought for you. But the other reason the sword has to be in the lake is that Gryffindor's sword here can be read as a stand-in for Arthur's Excalibur. Just to clarify, in most versions of the Arthurian legend, there's the sword and the stone, but that's not the same sword as Excalibur. There's a lot of swords. Arthur breaks the first sword in battle and then receives a new sword, Excalibur, from the Lady of the Lake. So Harry, just after breaking his wand in a fight scene, is led by the doe, a female deer, to the sword in the lake, and he wonders whether the doe is a Patronus or some kind of guardian of the pool. There's also another Arthurian legend in which 3 knights, Galahad, Percival, and Bors, follow a white deer in the forest and it turns into Jesus, and only after this are they able to find those Grail Hallows. And in yet another Arthurian legend, the knight Galahad pulls a different special sword from a stone floating in a river, and his ability to do this indicates that Galahad is the one who can find the Holy Grail. I think Harry sensed that it must be Ron who destroys the Horcrux because he was the one who was able to pull the sword from the water, maybe an allusion to this, especially since Galahad was also known for his ability to banish demons. Incidentally, in the Galahad story, the sword was called the Sword with a Red Hilt, and it had a pretty similar history to the Elder Wand, in that it was extremely powerful against the bearer's enemies, but also considered to be cursed, ultimately passing from hand to hand throughout history with a lot of bloodshed. Again, that Ron most gravitates toward the Elder Wand out of the 3 Hallows may be related to his doubling of Galahad in this scene. And there's also some complicated Arthurian hijinks involving a fake Excalibur, which we see paralleled in this book. Okay, so that was a lot of Arthurian legend making its way into Harry Potter in complex ways that mostly resist neat one-to-one comparisons. To me, these allusions and parallels don't cheapen Harry Potter or make it derivative. Honestly, pretty much every English language fantasy story is influenced by Arthurian legend in some way. Instead, as I said, I find it a nerdy pleasure to spot all of the allusions and think about how Rowling is playing with them in new ways. And also to realize that she's doing the same thing with lots of other stories and legends, such as Norse and Greek mythology. So, thank you for attending my deep dive into the icy pond that is Arthurian legend. I will see you in class.